Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and in this busy week I suggest that you give Ruiner a try. An awkward name to say, but Ruiner. If I was going to go for a northern accent, Ruiner, mate! Actually, more of a southern one, whatever. You get the idea. It's a game about ruining people in a really big way with lots of guns, a little bit of the old ultra-violence. Cyberpunk, specifically. It's brought to you by Reikon Studios, published by Devolver. And it is essentially a hyper-violent twin-stick shooter with sprinklings of things like Hotline Miami in there for good measure. The style, perhaps, is the reason why I think a lot of people were drawn to it initially. Some very impressive trailers, some really great music, and a dark, futuristic, neon-filled, dystopian environment. But does it play well? Oh, let's find out, shall we? And jump right into it. No point in hanging around, considering we're going to be jumping directly into a little bit of said ultra-violence. Now, I did mention this was a twin-stick shooter, and I was certainly not kidding. You can use the keyboard and mouse, but initially I had a few problems with it. Now, I don't believe that's actually because keyboard and mouse doesn't work very well. I actually think it works just fine. The issue is not the keyboard and mouse controls being suboptimal, no. The issue, as far as I can tell, is that the game has a little bit of an unusual camera position. Quite a few twin-stick games very much like to center your character in the middle of the screen, and of course, to go back to the originators of twin sticks, things like Robotron, then you would probably be keenly aware that you're in the center of the screen and you shoot things. Well, they like to change the angle on you just a little bit when it comes to this particular game, and for the first 20 minutes or so, I actually found it very difficult to aim. And I thought maybe it's keyboard and mouse, so I switched over to the controller, and I found it difficult to aim there too. But eventually I got the hang of it, and I think actually I could probably go back to the keyboard and mouse controls and really not actually have that many problems with it. It would most likely work just fine. Now, as you can see, it is a stylish, hyper-violent twin-stick shooter. And when I mention things like Hotline Miami, I don't make that comparison for no reason. This is a game where, for instance, you are working more often than not with whatever you can find on the ground. Weapons have very limited ammunition, and needless to say, that often results in you picking up whatever is available and just using that. Now, there is a concept of loot in this game, certainly. In fact, you can actually get superior versions of certain items which often have more ammunition. And the game also has a built-in skill system. As you level up, you will gain skill points, and they will allow you to unlock a variety of different skills. I was using my heal right there just to live through that, and frankly, I barely did. And you'll be able to do things like, say, this shock pulse, for instance, which stuns unshielded enemies. Very handy little device. You'll be able to buff up your HP. You'll be able to do things like make melee weapons last longer, since they also happen to have durability, increase the number of dashes, and you can do some pretty crazy stuff with dashes. As you can see here, you can actually chain dashes together, which is a feature that's so far, about 2 hours into the game, I haven't really felt the need to do. It explains how to do it in the tutorial, but I'm sure later on in the game there are some moments where that will help a lot. And as you probably notice, when you hold down the dash button, you actually get a much needed little bit of respite for a fairly short period of time, since you are able to slow down time. Game also kicks in bullet time every once in a while when you're about to get shot at, which gives you a handy little bit of time to react, which is sure as hell useful, I will tell you that for a fact. Ooh, this looks new. The TotalBiscuit. What's that all about? This game is actually completely stacked with weapons, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about it right off the bat, games, of course, like Hotline Miami have a decent number of weapons, but something like this has an absolute ton of the bloody things. And as a result, you end up with a lot of really nice choices, which is always good. It also means, of course, that you're forced to use whatever happens to be lying around, and that is not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. I actually think that's a rather good thing indeed. It forces that split-second improvisation. Another game to compare this to would probably be Fury, which is a boss rush game that came out last year, and there's a big difference in the fact that you have an awful lot more choice, and there is progression beyond simply learning how to get better. You know, Fury is very much a game about being given your entire arsenal right off the bat, and they are expecting you to just do as well as possible with that. And that's fine, but the problem is, I'm not much of a boss rush guy, as you're probably well aware. So when you toss this level of variety into the mix, then I start to get a little bit more interested. When I'm starting to be given choices as to what kind of weapons I can use, what kind of skills I can pick, maybe put together a loadout which suits my particular playstyle. Now that is when I start to get really interested in the game. And you probably noticed the comparison to Fury, just like simply because it's very dash heavy. You have these melee attacks, and you have to attack boss enemies only at very specific times when they don't have their shields up. Because, frankly, if you don't, then you're going to be in a very nasty position where you are actually having your bullets reflected right at you. And as you probably noticed, damage output in this game is very, very high, both on your end and on the enemies, which is always a good idea as far as I'm concerned. Games that allow you to feel deadly but simultaneously vulnerable are games that I often enjoy quite a bit. I was actually using my shield ability there to actually reflect his, but unfortunately get in their face and they will blow you up really, really quickly. Fury was also a game about precision. It was a game about being powerful but simultaneously quite fragile, requiring learning to utilize your very limited skill set as best as possible. But in this game, it's the exact opposite of that. You have a extremely varied skill set, and learning how to best use each combination of skills and all of the different weapons that can be found on the floor, as well as having to improvise every now and again with that, is a compelling little mix as far as I'm concerned. Very compelling indeed. Also means that you can come up with entirely different builds and play the game in a very different way to somebody else. But thankfully, you do also have the option to respec, so you're not going to necessarily be forced down a particular path. If you decide, hey, I really am not into this particular skill all that much, then feel free to try out something else, because they're all very, very good in their own right. And this guy is very, very good in his own right, and is frankly kicking my ass. They don't have a lot of energy, unfortunately. They get a couple of melee hits in there. And at this point, you're probably noticing, oh god, you're starting to really run out of stuff on the ground to use as powerful. Yep, you're damn right about that one. That is absolutely true. I am. Thankfully, you do have a default pistol called the Ruiner, which is quite pants, really. But you are able to upgrade it. Now, what is there that other Twinsticks don't do? What is there that's a little bit original about it? Well, I think a lot of it really comes down to that awesome moment-to-moment combat that feels more like a spectacle fighter than a traditional Twinstick. I think a lot of those games are just about mowing down enemies, and they're not necessarily about complex boss fights, which this game absolutely is. There's a lot going on with this game when it comes to all of the things that you're going to end up having to learn to do. The dodging needs to be very precise, but you're also able to get the same kind of power fantasy that you would find in a Twinstick. But it will probably take you a little bit of getting used to. What I mentioned earlier was that, and you've probably noticed it throughout the video, was the fact that the camera dynamically repositions itself, which means that rather than being in the center of the screen, you are often subject to being in a place where you perhaps wouldn't necessarily expect yourself to be. It does take some getting used to. It took me about 20 minutes, half an hour. I wasn't the only one. I mean, hell, Devolver was actually in the chat when I streamed this game, and they were advising me, look, yeah, it takes a little getting used to, because initially I was thinking, there's something weird about these controls. Like, the aim feels off. It doesn't feel like it's doing what I'm telling it to do. Thankfully, they sort of explained the issue I was having, and I was able to eventually get the hang of it, but it is something that requires a degree of commitment, no doubt about that. Put a shield in, there we go. I really don't want to be getting close to this guy. It's evidently clear that my melee strategy is failing me miserably. Maybe if I can get a stun off on him, that might work. Unfortunately, I think his shield was up there. I don't know how much we really got out of that, but... oh, God, if I could somehow maybe get him towards his explosive... never mind. I am the explosive barrel. I am Dave. My life was meaningless. Once you get used to that, though, it feels really good, really tight, really slick. And mostly fair. Difficult, no doubt about that. I've faced some challenging bosses, and I've seen some of the footage of the latest stuff, and it looks fairly damn brutal. Unsurprisingly. Hell, there's even this cult in the game that you can join when you die too much. I have no idea what that does. Maybe it makes the game a little bit easier. Certainly possible. But it is a game that is well aware that it is extremely tricky. Now, I'm actually going to beat this boss off screen so I can get a little bit further, because I frankly cannot imagine that you really want to see me consistently failing at this damn thing over and over again. So I will be right back after I have beaten this giant pain in the arse, and then we can talk a little bit more about what makes this game impressive, because there are plenty more things where that came from. Well, I was a bit of a dumbass on that one. I eventually figured out the best way to do it was to dash in, use my, God, that was awful, shock, and beat him to hell that way. I get myself a little grenade launcher out of that, and plenty of new abilities unlocked. Now, let's talk about some other strange things. The weapon grinder, an odd little concept. So, you collect karma in this game, and it's kind of the currency of this world. The more karma you have, the more well regarded you are in a society, and it essentially levels you up, gives you access to different areas, and these weapon grinders end up taking all of the leftover weapons from an area, cleaning it up, giving you a bunch of karma, and then they might spit out a special item for you, which is usually the same as a regular one. It'll usually be a higher tier weapon with a few more rounds in it, which is kind of useful. And as you level up, you'll unlock more skills. Now, here's a very odd little idea, something that you generally don't see in games like this. It lets you basically respec on the fly. So if I want to completely redo this, I can absolutely do it. Let's just say, look, you know, I'm not having a great time with personal shield, let's just say. So I'm going to take these skills away, and I've got a new skill, supply drop, so maybe I should grab that. There we go. And I can upgrade my shock launcher ability as well. So maybe this will work a little bit better. It allows for a lot of experimentation, although I can imagine it would kind of get a little bit annoying for min-maxers, because they'd probably want to mess around with this before every single fight. I haven't personally found it necessary. Some of the weapons kind of overlap with each other, so the stuff that I picked, other than passives, was really designed to complement each other and give me a thing to do on every button, which worked pretty well. So I really kind of like the system, honestly. I think it works pretty well. The problem is, of course, as I mentioned, if you have a few too many abilities, yes, for some reason it lets you do push-ups, and don't know why. If it's one of these buttons, there's like a weapon wheel. I think the supply drop might be one of them. If we head to that, it'll tell you what to. Hold X to select a weapon, summon a drone with X. Problem is that clashes with what I currently have on X. I believe there is a weapon wheel system that lets you switch things around. But obviously, if you end up getting overlapping abilities, it can be somewhat annoying. I actually haven't ever had to use this before, so I don't even know what the bloody button is. Everything else, though, you can clearly see activates on these other buttons there. Intriguing idea, frankly. Don't usually see that in an awful lot of games. They usually force you at least to be locked in for part of the level, but no, you can switch about pretty much whenever you want. Otherwise, you have a mixture of some pretty challenging bosses with these arena-style fights where you have to murder and combo your way through a bunch of grunts, which is a hell of a lot of fun, I might add. Especially with the bullet time, slowdown, teleports, and all sorts of things like that. Although I have found that occasionally on some of these levels, the game really likes to dick you over just a little bit. For instance, by putting like a shotgun shell trap just outside of your field of view. And the camera can, at times, not really give you a chance to react to that unless you already know it's there. So, bit of a dick move there. But outside of that, the difficulty is mostly fair, from what I can tell, at any rate. And what you also have here is this gorgeous cyberpunk aesthetic. I must say that some of the early levels definitely look quite similar. There's actually a really cool overworld that allows you to pick up side quests and do faction stuff and things like that. But outside of that, you're going to be fighting your way through industrial areas, factories, and the sort of cyberpunky-like sort of stuff. I'm hoping that there is a bit more variety later on when it comes to what everything looks like, because I have seen maybe enough factories and such to last me a bloody lifetime. But holy hell, while level design aesthetic might not be good, these constant flashes and images and visions that you get as this person is literally inside of your brain telling you what to do, and there's all sorts of crazy hacking stuff going on there. Now that is something you don't get to see an awful lot in games. And it looks absolutely gorgeous as far as I'm concerned. I think you might be seeing the Hotline Miami vibe as you die quite a bit in this game, but it is still satisfying as hell to be able to completely decimate large groups of enemies if you happen to do it right. Once you really get the hang of the system in play, you can do a hell of a lot of damage. Combo things together, use all of your abilities to the greatest effect, and it's really a game that rewards you learning how all of your skills work. Very satisfying, I tend to find. Now, there is one other thing that the game does very, very well, of course, and that's have a pretty damn killer soundtrack. At least you have to be happen to be into the darker side of electronica, at any rate. I'll do a little A+ rating for that one. A little bit better this time around. I want to find myself a weapon. I think I'm stuck on the Ruiner right now, which is frankly crap. Looks like they gave me a bunch of... You know, it would be nice being able to use this damn supply drop thingy if I could remember what the bloody button is to do it. See if I can figure that one out. Yeah, it literally does say X. I think you can, and that lets you select pretty much any weapon that you've picked up so far. Let's just remove this from the equation. I think I'll have to remove the skill entirely. There we go. Then I could use supply drop. There you go. Bit of an annoying clash, honestly. Ooh, what's one of the fun ones? If I recall correctly, the Predator is a good laugh. Let's grab that, shall we? Call that down. Don't let it land on you, it will kill you. The game has a lovely tendency of liking to do that. There we go. And I can get myself one of those. Then, of course, if I want to, I could just spec right out of this. That's sort of the issue with giving you that option, you know? I don't want to do that because it continually interrupts the flow, but I'm also very keenly aware that that is optimal. Being able to switch out a supply, get a weapon, pause the game, switch back out. They maybe want to do something about that. You know, that might be a tad excessive in what it allows you to do. But I appreciate the freedom regardless. Alright, I'm going to shut up for a little bit, let you hear some music, and let you appreciate the sound design of this thing somewhat. Looks like we might be fighting something a little bit unpleasant. Oh my, is this the laser boss? I'm dead. I'm horribly dead. Well, that's very, very rude. Huh. Let's rock and roll.
Your brother needs you. It was painful to watch.
Well, this boss is not screwing around, is it? Instant death unless you're able to maintain your shield. It kills you pretty much immediately. It's an unforgiving game, no doubt. In a month of unforgiving games, honestly, there's been quite a few of them. Combining dodge with that seems to allow you to hold your shield up for just long enough to actually survive it, but what a absolute beast of a boss they came up with here. It's just unpleasant. Horrendously unpleasant. But the game isn't. The game is actually really, really enjoyable. And perhaps it may have been, say, shoved out of the public eye by Cuphead, which I think was maybe even more of a success than people necessarily expected it to be. Well deserved, of course. But if I were to choose between this and Cuphead, I would certainly pick this, simply because it does have some exceptionally cool action in it, and a great suite of awesome skills, and a really cool cyberpunk world to explore. Whether or not I'm ever going to beat this damn thing, well, that's a different matter entirely. But I think respecking for shield might be good for this fight. Oh my. It's a hell of a game, ladies and gents. Make sure not to ignore it just because there happens to be a wonderful game about cups and the devil hanging around. And yes, that is damn good, but it doesn't mean you should be ignoring the pleasures that are to be found here in Ruina. It really does kick all manner of arse. Mostly mine, as I think you can see. My name's been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. And I'll see you next time.